So one day, Charlie Brown is talking to Violet, and there's a table of books, and Charlie Brown says to Violet, "I've just been reading about the decline and fall of the Roman Empire. I've also read about the decline of Hollywood, the decline of popular music, the decline of family life, the decline of imperialism, the decline of morality, and the decline of boxing." In one of the last panels, Violet is taken back by all of this darkness, and Charlie Brown responds, "I've always been fascinated by failure." Do you ever feel like that's where religion is? A fascination with failure? I've been going through a process recently where I have, actually this has been going on for quite a while, but of healing my relationship with the religions that I was raised in. And healing that relationship is not, I believe, is not just saying, "Oh, gee, I forgive you," but to be able to be grateful for it. To be able to grab a hold of some ideas that are meaningful to me today. And in the religions I was raised in, and I was raised in some pretty dark religions around this idea of failure. I was raised in a religion that, that old gospel song that says, "Saved a wretch like me," what is that?
Amazing Grace.
Amazing Grace. And we've changed the words when we do that song of "a soul like me" or something, but I was thinking about the power of redemption. And I'm so thankful for the religions I was raised in because it talked about the power, the redemptive power, the power of redemption. And redemption has a very soft place in my heart, a place where I give such value to that, and it's a very tender, loving place within me, the idea of redemption. And this week I was kind of grabbing a hold of the idea of, a wretch like me, and not in order to beat myself up or anything, but I was thinking about the fact that we as human beings, we wrote that song. We wrote that song. And believe it or not, where I was trying to be in a place of honoring that writing, the wretchedness, the things that we can do as human beings that can be so challenging and difficult. And I was living in that place, the wretched things we can do. And then I stepped over into the redemption part of it. The redemption that represents good. And this week I was remembering a story I'd read many years ago that I think is really profound. And it was about World War I. World War I was truly a wretched human act. One of the most difficult wars that humanity has ever engaged in terms of on-the-ground combat. The combination of the weather and the geography and the tactics that were used, it was absolutely, completely devoid of any humanity. It was horrible. Read a story where there was a man who was involved in World War I. He was on the front lines, and he had just done about 24 or 48 hours of this horrible combat and everything that was going on. And it was close to Christmas time. It was in Europe, and it was very cold, and the conditions were horrible. So finally, the battles subsided, and both groups kind of pulled back to figure out what they were going to do next or whatever they were doing. And the gentleman I read about was pulling a midnight watch, which meant he had to stand his post. It was either from midnight to 2 or midnight to 4 in the morning. So he's out there. He's a young American. He's off in a foreign land. He's been subjected to all of this, and he's very homesick, and Christmas is coming, and he doesn't know if he'll see tomorrow, and just all that stuff. He looks up at a clear sky on a frigidly cold night somewhere in Europe, and he sees the stars. And he's shivering, and he's holding on to his weapon, standing his watch. And he wonders, like we all do, is there a God? Is there good? Is there love? What is this? And feeling completely trapped and in that place. So he stands there, and suddenly, from over the fields, from somewhere out there in the darkness, a long ways away, he hears Christmas carols being sung. And he listens, and he realizes that the people singing the Christmas carols are German soldiers. And they obviously are sitting somewhere in their encampment miles away. And these songs came wafting over the fields. And at first he was startled, and then secondly, he was like, okay, what do I do with this? And then he relaxed into it. And he felt a warmth come over him. He thought about the great Christmases of his life. He thought about the season. And he lost himself in the fact that he was being serenaded by his enemy. His enemy had taken him back to a very special, warm place. And eventually, as time went by, he felt that presence we call God, that presence we call Spirit. And then eventually he came to a place to where he was grateful for those who were serenading him. And to a place to where he loved them. And he was hoping so much that they wouldn't stop singing. He was hoping so much they would continue on with their songs. And obviously, not knowing German, he didn't know the words they were singing, but he knew the words. He recognized them. I got to tell you, it is amazing to me. It is amazing to me where good comes up in this world. Ernest Holmes believed that good is simply there. That there is this power of redemption, this power of grace. And religion, in the religion that I came from, very much talked about grace. And in metaphysics, we talk about grace as being that regeneration process. A regeneration process of the goodness that is basically there. When I think of this story, I think of things like, some years ago, when it first came out, Ken Burns' documentary on baseball came out, and having such a love affair with baseball, a family member gave me the set when it first came out. It's on videotape. I still have it. I don't have anything to play it on, but I still have it. It's one of my treasured possessions. And one of the things I love about Ken Burns' documentary of baseball is starting almost every episode, and he does the episodes in 9 innings, okay? And so there's 9 episodes. And he goes through the decades of baseball and stuff, but almost every single one, he starts off the documentary with just showing a bunch of kids playing baseball somewhere, okay? Now we think of these great cathedrals of professional sports. We think of the billions of dollars spent in these places. We think of these millionaires and multimillionaires who play the game. We think of the owners. We think of the gold rings that are given out for World Series championships. We think of the Hall of Fame. We think of TV. We think of stardom. But Ken Burns takes us back to a place where it all starts, with kids. And what I love about it so much is that sometimes the imagery will come up, and it will be a bunch of kids in a street of a slum. It'll be a bunch of kids in a vacant lot. It'll be kids in Puerto Rico, kids in Cuba, kids in inner city America, kids in China, somewhere. Kids in Puerto Rico, we know that there's a tradition down there of making baseball gloves out of cardboard. They use packing tape and string to make their baseball gloves, and they use broomsticks, and they use whatever ball they can. And if the ball is hit somewhere and they don't know where it is, they stop the game and they go find it because it's the only ball they have. It's held together with tape. I love those images, and I'll tell you why. Because as the camera rolls and these kids are playing, there is laughter, there is joy. And when they stand at the plate, they are the greatest superstar in the world. And when they stand throwing the ball in, there's not even a mound. It's not even a pitcher's mound. There aren't even bases. There's garbage cans. There's cars. There's cardboard. There's whatever it is. But in this place is good, is joy. I love that aspect of that. I love the fact that, I don't love the fact that we had World War II, but there were times in World War II where the battle would end and a bunch of guys would get together and they would put together a baseball game on the beach somewhere in the Pacific or in a bombed out vacant lot somewhere in Europe, and a bunch of guys would get together. They would find some sort of a ball and some sort of a stick and they would play. They would come together. Finding that good, finding that place where there is some sunshine. I love that part of us, that human part of us, that human spirit. It's amazing to me when I used to work with young people who are in trouble in institutions, and one of my favorite things I got to do, and I didn't get to do this very much, but I used to like to do it on visiting days, on Sundays or Saturdays. We had a room and the families would come in, and I'd see these guys, and they had done, they had rap sheets, they'd done horrible things, and they had their gang tattoos and everything. And I love seeing a guy who was 17, 18 years old, who was so, overly filled with testosterone. I mean, way too much of it. It was just, dribbling out of him everywhere. And he was angry, and he was nasty, and he had done all these things. And to watch him come into a room and sit down with his mom and show her a picture he had made in school. And they would laugh, and she'd take that picture and embrace it, and it was like a little kid who was in second or third grade. And some of them were literally made with crayons. What does this picture mean? Oh, you draw trees so well. I love this. And they would laugh, and Mom would share some stories about something Grandma was doing, and they would laugh about it. And even in this place, there was this incredible joy, this incredible good. I remember I was watching Antiques Roadshow a while back, and someone had brought forward an art object that had come down through the family, and it was what was categorized as folk art, and it was this beautiful piece that was made of kind of like scrap wood and cardboard and cigar boxes and scraps of paper. And they talked about the fact that during World War II, when there was a German concentration camp somewhere, I think it was in the central part of Canada, and one of their relatives he was in the army, and he was assigned to be a guard there, said these prisoners would sit there far away from home in a whole different land, not knowing how long they're going to be there, away from their loved ones. And yet they would sit down and they would craft these pieces of art. Where's that come from? Where does it come from within us to strike up a baseball game? Where does it come from within us to make an art object? Where's it come from within us to sit down and have a conversation about our grandma? Where does that place come? If you look at the recovery movement, the start of AA, Bill W. and Dr. Bob, who are two beloved founders, of all the founders. There's a story about them, and I don't know if this is true or not, because like anything, recovery has a lot of folklore to it. Everything's got folklore. There's a story that when Bill W. and Dr. Bob were putting together the tenets of recovery, and one of them is fellowship. The idea of reaching out and helping another person. And the story goes that when they were putting together the concepts, they were trying to figure out what was important in terms of turning your life around. The story goes that they were in Dayton, Ohio, in an area of the city that was once called what we refer to as Skid Row. All the end-of-the-road bars. I mean, these are not sports bars or Cheers or anything. This is a place where you went and you were in the last stages of alcoholism. And they were standing on a street, and it was the middle of the afternoon, bright sunshine, early afternoon, and two gentlemen come out of a bar, and they are just completely inebriated. Probably been on a bender for days. They come out in the sunshine. And these two gentlemen are watching them. And they're familiar with what that feels like. And they're familiar with addiction. And the two gentlemen go to cross the street. And as it turns out, one of them is a little less inebriated than the other. And so the street is busy. They're going to cross the street. And the one who is least inebriated grabs his friend quickly before he steps in front of a bus and holds his arm. And he kind of, looks both ways. And he takes his friend and he leads him across the street. And one of the two gentlemen, I don't know who, turned to the other and said, "Look, even on the stormy sea of booze, there is that capacity we have for good, to help somebody, to come together." That's what redemption is about. Now, in the religion that I grew up in, the redemption was that we would turn ourselves over to a mediary with God, or a ritual, a tradition of some kind. But what I know from metaphysics is, what we believe is that there is that place within us, no matter how much it may be buried, where good resides. That's what Ernest Holmes, when I read this morning, he said, we got to get this. We have to get this, that good is there, that good is abiding, that no matter how horrible things may be, how wretched things may be, there are the Christmas carols, there is the baseball game, there is the drawing, there is one person helping another. There is something within us that wants to create. Charles Fillmore, the co-founder of Unity, wrote, when he talks about this, he says, "There is always a saving grace. There is always a saving grace, a regeneration in divine goodness, coming forth when we most need it. The teachings of the great spiritual masters are that every individual can realize the divinity within themselves, and thus accomplish redemption. This is, quite simply, the teaching of love." You ever wonder what love is? That's it. Love is that place that resides within us to be able to move ourselves in an amazing direction. John Bradshaw, who I'm a big fan of and who did a lot of work on the family. John Bradshaw did a lot of work around addiction and the family. He did a whole series on PBS years ago. It was called John Bradshaw and the Family. He wrote all kinds of books. He's the one who coined the phrase dysfunctional family and things like that. John Bradshaw was asked one time, he did so much work on families that have problems and the things that come out of problematic families. And so someone one time decided, well, John Bradshaw, is there such a thing as a healthy family? Is there such a thing as a healthy family? Is there such a thing as a functional family? He said, yeah, there is. He said a healthy, functional family is a place where people are allowed to love themselves. Where no matter what it takes, people are allowed to find that place that Phil Moore talks about. And that there are families that step into these places and allow their members to work through whatever they have to do to move beyond the wretchedness. A family is a place that, metaphorically speaking, is the vacant lot where a baseball game can take place. A family, metaphorically speaking, is a place where people can sit down to Christmas carols. A family is a place where we can come in from a wretched place, a wretched state of mind, wretched events, and we can find good. But more importantly, we can find the space to where we can find the good within ourselves. You see, Bill W. and Dr. Bob that day, what they said was, this is a wonderful thing, and if we can harness this idea of how love shows up into a healthy place, into a place that says, I will be here as you find your way in the stormy sea of whatever it is. And know that there is something great within you. I had a situation come up for me recently where I was working through a lot of healing, and I don't want to go into details about it. It was a pretty long process, several months, and this is just very recently. And I needed to find my good. I needed to find that place. And I was telling Judy one day, I said, one of the hard things with being in the same town for many, many years is that everywhere you go, there are ghosts. Okay? So, being a metaphysician, I started thinking about the idea of the ghost and what the ghost means metaphorically. I mean, I'm not saying ghosts don't exist. That's all cool. I'm just saying metaphorical ghosts, okay? So what do ghosts mean metaphorically? Well, imagine you're in your house one day and a ghost shows up, okay? And so you're standing there talking to the ghost. I mean, after maybe running away or, hiding in the bathroom for a while or whatever. You come to your senses and you confront the ghost. And you say to the ghost, what are you doing here? Well, conventional wisdom says the ghost will say, I have unfinished business, right? Isn't that what all the mediums say? The ghosts are here because they have unfinished business, right? Okay. So I was telling Judy, I was saying, sometimes it's hard to be in a town, because see, Judy's all into I love this town. The trees, I love the red dirt, I love the, she thinks paradise is so quaint and wonderful, and I agree. But I was telling her one time, when she was being overly optimistic and I was really into a whiny phase, you know what I'm saying? And her optimism was a buzzkill to my whininess. And so I was trying to make my case. I mean, I really wanted to whine. I was intoxicated by that sort of wine. It's amazing. That wine will intoxicate you as well. Okay. So I was telling Judy, I said, it's hard to be in a town where there's so many ghosts. So I start, and of course, being a metaphysician and with some just loving help from her to be a metaphysician, like, go figure it out. Okay. So I got into the metaphor of the ghosts, and I thought, okay, so unfinished business. And so I thought, okay, what's the unfinished business? What's the unfinished business? And there's been so much wonderful healing in my own life, and there has been such a transformation take place in my life. That what I realized is that that there were certain things that came up that I allowed to take me away from my good. I allowed them to take me back to a time when things were not so good for me. And times when I was involved in some wretched stuff. And times when I really didn't know who and what my good was. But that's not true today. And I thought, wow, it's amazing how easily, like Charlie Brown, we can get so caught up in the failure part of it. And we fail to see the goodness that's there. And I've given you some examples this morning of some extraordinary kinds of goodness, but just imagine the good that just shows up from moment to moment to moment to moment. I mean, a conversation in a grocery store, reading the right article, being on the right website, listening to something on the radio in passing that helps illuminate where we are. And we do that because we're attracting our good. This morning I went for a walk, and there were a bunch of ravens were just raising a bunch of Cain. I mean, they were just swearing at each other and going crazy. And I really wanted to get into my walk, and so I looked up and I realized there was just a whole bunch of them, dozens of them were flying in one particular area. I don't know if there's some kind of a raven kager going on today or something, but they're all going in some direction. And they were just making a bunch of noise, and so I stood there, and I realized, the sky was absolutely gorgeous. This deep blue with these clouds that were just all kinds of shades of gray. And I was there to walk and think about today and think about the talk and all that kinds of stuff. And I just stood there looking for a while, and they kept going. And I looked at this incredible sky, and I thought, oh my God, it's there. It's there. The goodness is there. And I'm so grateful for those ravens for making all that noise. Because they took me out of this place of, Sunday, and I got to think, and I got to walk, and stuff. And I just stood there, and when it was all over, I kind of stood there for a while. I forgot why I was there. I forgot it was Sunday. The goodness is always there. And the goodness is always there within us. That place of redemption. And I'm not saying that the word wretched is a good word, but I embrace that word today because even in the wretchedness is good. Even in the wretchedness is the good. And any philosophy worth its salt is there to remind us of that. That's what Holmes wants to say. This goodness follows us all the days of our life. I want to end this morning. I think we all have the highest respect for school teachers, this difficult job that they do, this profession they have. But none more difficult, I think, than junior high school teachers. I mean, Emma, do you hear me on that one? You know what I'm saying? God bless those kids. Junior high, man. I mean, hormones and, too much stuff. And, junior high is tough. I was listening to public radio this week, and they were talking to a junior high teacher and talking about his career. And first of all, when he said his whole career was in junior, I love junior high kids. I told him that. Oh, God bless you. Talk about some good. You know what I'm saying? I mean, this guy, But anyway, he talked about how challenging they can be, and he said there was a time in his life, and he was talking about the idea that that whole thing of being teacher and student. And most teachers will tell you that that's a very fluid kind of idea, that very often the student is the teacher and the teacher is the student, and it kind of goes back and forth. He's talking about the fact that, he said, I have the title of teacher, but it was the students who did a lot of teaching. He's talking about there was a time in his life where he had a hard time seeing good things, everything was going wrong. So he assigns an essay to his class. And a junior high school girl in her essay came back with this, God bless her. And she said, the trees were sprayed with the scent of wonderful. And he said he read that and is like, my life ain't so bad. This is a really good, beautiful place. I would appreciate it if you join me in affirmative prayer. The truth that I know right now is that God, infinite spirit, this creative force in the universe, is a power for good. Period. A power for good. And that each and every one of us as children of God have access to this power on a nonstop basis. And that essence of us is good. The essence of this universe is good. And I am so grateful for that. And I stand, and I know that we stand in a place of opening up to that good and recognizing it as it comes up in our life, all around us, in us, and through us. And that today we dedicate ourselves to being the agents of good, of stepping into that position of Holy Spirit, of bringing God's love forth in this world as good, as good. And in my gratitude for this, I let my word go, knowing that it's so, and so it is.